Hello everyone, my name is Rachel and welcome back to another true crime episode, or if you're new here, welcome. Today's case isn't your typical true crime story. We will be discussing a case so murky, so morally ambiguous that it'll absolutely challenge everything you think you know about consent and responsibility. It involves consent, control, and a possibly fatal concoction of alcohol and risky fantasies. Could a wife and mother of three really be a killer, or was this all just a huge misunderstanding? Let me know what you think as we go over the details. But before we get into the details of this case, I want to talk about a brand that I have been loving lately. With all of these endless options with online shopping these days, it can feel overwhelming to try chasing everything you need across so many different stores. Whether it's home items, clothing, everyday essentials, or well-made luxury items, Quince brings it all together. One destination, premium quality, and affordable prices. From 100% grade A Mongolian cashmere and buttery soft bamboo bedding to 14-karat gold jewelry, Quince brings it all together in one place. And even better, everything with Quince is priced about 50% less than what you'd find with similar brands. By working directly with top-tier manufacturers and cutting out the middleman, Quince can bring you exceptional quality without the markup. Plus, they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. Personally, I got a couple of clothing items from Quince. First, I got this super comfy olive green shirt that I'm wearing right now. The material is so soft and smooth, it's become a regular in my everyday clothes rotation. I also got these gray joggers, which I'm not exaggerating when I say I wear these almost every single day. They're so comfortable and they fit so well. If they're not dirty, I'm wearing them. I also got these jeans, which again fit me so well and pair perfectly with so many different outfits. So give Quince a try out for yourself. Upgrade your home, wardrobe, and more with high-end essentials from Quince. Use the link down below to head to quince.com/RachelShannon for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Thank you again so much to Quince for partnering with me on today's video. With all of that being said, let's get into the details of this wild case. Then 29-year-old Michaela Reilersdam appeared to be living the picture-perfect life, the married mother of three living in a beautiful home in San Bernardino, California. She and her husband, Brandon, had been together for over 10 years after they met while she was working as a waitress at a local restaurant in Modesto. On her Instagram, the two were seen smiling together at the beach, at sporting events, or with their three young children in front of the Christmas tree. According to those who knew Michaela best, she is the doting mother to her three boys aged 10, 8, and 3 years old. She spent her time taking care of her three boys, raising them in a loving home. She went out of her way to buy organic whole foods to make sure her family stayed healthy. She was involved at their school, took them to the playground whenever she could, and even took the boys with her to volunteer after the California wildfires, all so she could show her boys how to be good people. But behind the scenes, Michaela and her husband were living a much more spicy, erotic lifestyle. Together, Brandon and Michaela ran an adult entertainment company called SynCal Entertainment. It's essentially a company where you can hire strippers. The company boasts itself as the, quote, #1 adult party entertainment service in California, offering male and female dancers available for hire. In addition to running the adult entertainment business, Michaela also ran an OnlyFans page and worked as an escort for the site Secret Hostess. On her OnlyFans page, which had over 11,000 followers, she went by the name Claire Blake. There, of course, she would stream herself doing sex acts on her own and with others. On the escort site, she went by the name Ashley SynCal. The H is silent. In her bio on the website, she introduces herself as classy and experienced. She's flawless to look at, but has skills beyond her physical appearance. She can hold intellectual, stimulating conversations. She's non-judgmental and can fit anyone's desires and tastes. Her bio states, quote, Hello, and welcome to your dream come true. My name is Ashley, the H is silent. I am an upscale and classy creation that has been flawlessly designed and perfected over the 10 years of experience I have. I'm able to carry myself through an intellectual and stimulating conversation. Maybe you don't want to talk, but you do want to experience the most intoxicating and provocative performance dedicated to you alone. Consider me the chameleon of this industry, able to redesign myself to your specific desires. Continuing, I am new to the site, but not to the scene. I have been in the SW industry for 10 years. I know I look too young to have 10 years experience, but I do, and it shows when we spend time together. I am well-spoken, well-mannered, and beautiful. Everywhere I go, people stop and stare because they think I look too beautiful to be another American and want to know what makes me famous. Not only do I have all the right curves in all the right places, but in contrast, I have a slender build, juicy lips, and kinky curls that bounce all over the place while I dance and laugh, making it very hard not to fall in love with me. I'm always requested back. No matter what you thought your type was, I am always the exception. I am a multi-business owner, CEO, and a mother of 3 wild boys, so please value my time and I will respect and value yours. I have so many naughty games to keep us busy, dirty body shots for those of you who want to have a drink, and of course my specialty is the art of my lap dance. I come from a lifelong background of dance, and I've learned how to incorporate acrobatics into my lap dances. I promise you no other listed on this site is as professional as I am. I am willing to travel. I am a good listening ear and can keep a conversation going. You can put me in pretty much any demographic and I could mold right into wherever I am. I am a non-judgmental person, so please bring on the fetishes. I'm lactating since I breastfeed, and I have beautiful feet with pretty toe rings. Happy to see couples, parties of all sizes, and private individuals. I will take a deposit of $100 to reserve me, which can be issued through Zelle, Cash App, Venmo, or an invoice. FaceTime's $25, FacePlay $150, in person $500 plus, give me a generous tip. She also lists her prices for the other services she offers. For in-calls, you can get the ultimate experience for $1,500, a wild experience for $1,100, or mild for $800. For out-calls, the prices are $1,200, $800, and $500 respective. In-calls are when the client will travel to a specific location determined by the worker, such as a room in their own house or a hotel. An out-call is when the escort will travel to the location determined by the client, such as their house or a hotel of their choosing. As far as I've seen, her husband, Brandon, was totally okay with her being an escort and having an OnlyFans. I've seen some reports that he was on the page with her at times, but I'm not 100% sure. What we do know is that he did have access to the page and even helped her manage it. So not only was he okay with it, but it seems like he actively encouraged it. By March of 2023, 55-year-old Michael Dale discovered Michaela's profile on the escort site and began messaging her to discuss her taking him on as a potential client. Throughout the messages, Michael inquired to see if Michaela would do various acts of BDSM with him. BDSM is basically an umbrella term for different types of sexual acts, including bondage, dominance, and submission. For Michael, these requests included things like Michaela buying super glue and a pair of knee-high women's boots and supergluing them to his feet. He also wanted her to glue his eyes shut and glue a toy into his mouth. He also requested that she bring saran wrap so she can wrap him up like a mummy. With all of those requests, the two came to an agreed upon price, which they both felt was appropriate given what Michael was asking for. Michael ended up paying Michaela about $11,000 total for a night of fetish fun. By around 6 p.m. on April 17, 2023, Michaela arrived to Michael's home where he lived with a few roommates for the outcall. I will note, and it's been reported differently depending on what source you look at, that one of the roommates had only been living with Michael for about 5 days. Either that or Michael had only been living in that house for about 5 days. But regardless, it was still a pretty new situation. Michael did warn his roommates, though, that he would be having a visitor, though I doubt he specified what kind. When she arrived, it was said that he appeared visibly intoxicated, but this didn't seem to faze Michaela. It was probably something she was used to as an escort. People probably drank all the time. This stuff is pretty typically mixed with alcohol, so it doesn't seem like Michaela really put much thought to that. So, for the following 4 hours, the two spent time in Michael's room, performing pretty much anything and everything Michael wanted. According to one of Michael's roommates, throughout that time, he did hear one time where Michael said, "Can we stop? I'll pay you more money to stop." He didn't hear much more else going on until about 10:10 p.m. when a frazzled and panicked Michaela came out of the room asking for one of the roommates to call 911. Once that roommate was alerted, she alerted the third roommate, who ran to Michael's room to see what was going on. In the room, he saw Michaela on the phone with 911 while performing CPR on Michael, who was lying on the floor unresponsive, wearing sweatpants, and was wrapped in cling wrap basically from head to toe. When police arrived, they found that Michael was unconscious, with his arms and legs tightly wrapped in plastic wrap. His arms were above his head, and there was tape wrapped around his wrists, covering his hands and fingers, and he was wearing knee-high women's boots, which were glued to him. They were also met with Michaela, who was still attempting CPR on Michael. Paramedics then took over life-saving efforts, quickly transporting him to the Palomar Hospital for treatment. However, the following day, Michael Dale was declared brain dead, and after 4 days of life support, medical staff realized that there was nothing further they could do to save his life. He was declared dead at the hospital. Back at the scene, Michaela spoke with investigators about what happened. She said that she was there to perform some BDSM acts with Michael. She said that this was her first time engaging in fetish behavior and that he had some very unusual requests. Of course, seeing how he was found, she had to explain why he was wrapped up, bound, and had glue all over him. She said, though, that she didn't do everything he asked of her. There were some things that were off limits. She refused to glue his eyes shut and refused to glue a toy into his mouth. On the other hand, if she was doing something and he asked her to stop, she stopped. She also mentioned that some of what they did was recorded as content for her OnlyFans page. At the time, Michaela was cooperative and forthcoming. She said that Michael was very drunk and that he was going in and out of sleep for some of the encounter. If he fell asleep, she would try waking him up, telling him that she's going home if he didn't get back up. After about 4 hours with Michael, when she realized that he wasn't breathing, that is when she called 911 and tried to save his life. She willingly gave police her phone and allowed them to download her records. Those records confirmed much of what we've discussed up to this point. Michael did in fact request that he be wrapped up like a mummy and have his wrists and legs bound, and did want his eyes glued shut, among other requests. But they also found several videos on Michaela's phone which showed much of their encounter together. In one of the videos, they found that Michael had pink duct tape over his mouth, a plastic bag over his head, which was then wrapped in more saran wrap. The bag and saran wrap was then secured tightly around his head and neck with duct tape. In one of the videos, Michaela can be heard saying, "Maybe I should tighten up your neck." It was then found that there were several photos of Michael in this condition, which were sent to her husband, Brandon. Brandon replied saying that those photos were turning him on and encouraged Michaela to do even more fetish things, trying to get more money out of Michael. But most damning of all was the final video found on Michaela's phone. It showed Michaela pleasing herself with a vibrator as Michael laid unconscious next to her with the bag over his head for almost 8 minutes. It appears that Michaela is totally unconcerned with his well-being or the fact that he clearly is unable to breathe or remove the bag from his head. It was only after those 8 minutes when it appears that Michaela finally realized that something was wrong with Michael and alerted their roommates to call emergency services. I want to note that after seeing these videos, police spoke with Michaela once again, and she continued to be forthcoming and cooperative, but she denied having placed the bag on his head and repeated that anything they did was at his request. Now, after Michael's death, his body was sent to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. Not much is known about Michael, and no photos have been released of him as far as I can find. What we do know is that he was white, 6'2" tall, weighing 250 pounds, so he was a big guy. In the toxicology report, it was found that Michael had an extremely high level of alcohol in his system. His blood alcohol content was about 0.33 when he had first arrived to the hospital, which is more than 4 times the legal limit for driving in most states. It was found that shortly before Michaela's arrival, Michael told her that he had drank an entire 5th of vodka. Knowing that and the fact that he was admitted to the hospital 4 hours after their encounter began, which is when his blood alcohol level was taken, it can be assumed that his BAC was even higher when Michaela first arrived. His past medical history shows that Michael was struggling with chronic alcoholism and substance abuse, as well as hypertension and diabetes. He was also taking trazodone for depression at the time. Other records showed that he had spent some time in rehab in the past. In the days before his death, it was also found that Michael messaged his AA sponsor to admit that he had slipped up and was drinking heavily in the days before his death. After the examination, the medical examiner ruled that Michael's cause of death was the result of asphyxiation. His manner of death was determined to be homicide. Up to this point, this whole case is very much in a gray area. We know that at least most of what Michaela did to him was at his request, which is proven by the text messages. Obviously, some of it may have been requested in person, but we don't know for sure. Obviously, a plastic bag being over somebody's head is very unusual, so we don't know for sure whether the plastic bag was at his request. But some people within the BDSM community have made comments on this case. They have said that plastic bags over the head is relatively common, but safety is a huge concern for anyone participating in BDSM in general. Essentially, they've said that they want the illusion of danger while making sure no one is seriously injured. So the plastic bag thing is very risky, and most consider it edgy. However, it's been agreed that it's not out of the question that Michael could have asked for it. However, as we know, Michael was extremely intoxicated at the time, which makes his ability to consent a bit questionable. That being said, if she did want to follow through with Michael's requests, it was also Michaela's responsibility to make sure she did so in a safe manner. Given that he was completely tied up and unable to move, it was on her to make sure she could remove the bag within an appropriate amount of time. We know that he was in that bag for at least 8 minutes when he was on camera, but it could have been much longer than that. We don't know how long he was in the bag before the pictures were taken or before the video was taken. That being said, 8+ minutes without much oxygen is way too long, and Michaela should have known that. For the 2 years that followed Michael's death, investigators continued putting the pieces together, deciding what action was appropriate. But then, by Valentine's Day of this year, 2025, now 31-year-old Michaela Reilersdam has been arrested and charged with Michael's murder. She pleaded not guilty to these charges and was denied bail. Since her arrest, she is awaiting her trial in jail. In the meantime, both the prosecution and defense have given a glimpse as to what they will be arguing at trial. The prosecution have highlighted a few key points in their arguments. They have stated that the evidence shows that Michael did pay Michaela to perform bondage acts, but there's nothing to prove that he asked her to put the bag over his head and obstruct his breathing. They also talked about how his arms were bound along with his wrists and fingers. Even if he could move his arms, his fingers were taped together so tightly that he would have been unable to manipulate the bag or cling wrap to get it off of his head. They also pointed out the picture she sent to her husband where he encouraged her to keep going and get more money. Maybe she was trying to push him as far as she could to get more and more out of him, but she pushed it too far. They also said that given Michael's blood alcohol level, Michaela should have questioned his ability to give consent. At a 0.33 BAC, brain function and judgment are impaired and can cause loss of consciousness and possibly even death. He was tied up, unable to help himself, and was going in and out of consciousness. At some point, Michaela should have realized that Michael was too drunk to consent. Maybe she did realize, but kept going so that she could get more money. That is some of what the prosecution will likely argue at the trial. The defense is also using Michael's BAC to support their arguments. They said that his blood alcohol level was so high that respiratory failure would have come on faster than if he wasn't so intoxicated. He also had trazodone in his system, which would have further increased his intoxication levels. Plus, mixed with his hypertension and diabetes, he's much more susceptible to the effects of all this alcohol. Michaela had absolutely no knowledge of his medical history or the medications he was taking. It was not her responsibility to make sure that Michael was acting in his own best interest. When it comes to loss of consciousness, she couldn't have known whether he was actually passing out from alcohol and the medications or if he was just falling asleep. Then, the biggest argument for the defense is the lack of intent. There's no proof that Michaela ever intended to harm Michael. She has no violent history in her past. Then, as they saw in the video, after she realized that something was wrong, she immediately called the authorities, waited on scene for them to arrive, and was cooperative with them throughout the entire process. Her actions may have been reckless. She may have waited too long to call the authorities, but there's no proof that she ever actually wanted to harm him. There's also no proof that she put the plastic bag over his head to begin with. It can be argued that his hands and arms were tied up after he placed the bag over his own head. So, as of right now, that is a glimpse into what both sides may argue. I have a feeling maybe they'll run fingerprints on the bag and duct tape to see if, he did have any control over that. I'm sure there's a lot of evidence that's going to go into it based on pictures, videos, and forensics maybe to put together a whole picture of what exactly happened. Because really at this point, the only person that can say what happened is the person that was in the room with the man who died. As of right now, we don't yet have a trial date. As far as I could find, both sides are still working on their arguments, and Michaela remains in jail. To me, I think this is a case of determining whose responsibility it was to ensure Michael's safety. As I've been discussing throughout the video, as we know, Michael did make a lot of unusual and possibly unsafe requests. Many of these requests were made before Michaela arrived while they were texting and calling. At that time, even if Michael was drunk, Michaela had no way of knowing. To me, the biggest thing that stands out is him wanting a toy superglued into his mouth and Michaela refusing to do that. To me, it said that Michael was interested in having his oxygen or breathing ability impaired. That's like sort of, a fetish for some people. Michaela likely knew that doing this was too dangerous, so maybe that's why they went with the bag over his head instead. I don't think it's a far stretch to say that a man who wanted a toy shoved in his mouth and secured there with glue may have requested that his breathing be constricted in another way, such as having a bag over his head as an alternative option. Part of this, the defense might argue, is that maybe Michael wanted to die. Maybe he had a death wish that night and was requesting all of these strange things to be done to him so that, he could have a lot of fun in his last hours. I don't doubt that the defense might argue that as an option. But with all of that being said, with Michaela refusing to glue the toy in his mouth, it leaves us with two options. If Michaela refused to glue the toy, that might mean that she probably knew that restricting his breathing like that was dangerous. If she thought about that, then why didn't she use the same logic with taping a bag over his head? The other option is that Michaela may have thought that she left enough room for him to breathe and got carried away with things and didn't realize that he had passed out or didn't realize that this was dangerous. I think she may have thought he was asleep when she was on that video and, pleasuring herself. But again, If she thought that he was asleep, why didn't she remove the bag knowing that his breathing was restricted? All of that being said, the other argument was whose responsibility it was to determine what was safe for them to do. The obvious answer here is Michael. Clearly, he wanted these things done to him up to a certain point, but at the same time, he was heavily intoxicated. If their roles were reversed and it was a heavily intoxicated female who was murdered during a sex act, we would all be questioning consent. I think the same applies here. At what point should Michaela have decided that Michael was not making safe decisions? At what point does the responsibility fall on her to keep Michael safe? Because even if it is argued that Michael wanted a death wish, he wanted her to do these things to him until he died, that's still not okay for her to do. If you were to ask a friend to shoot you or kill you or push you off of a building, if they did that, they can still be held responsible for your murder even if you asked them to do it. So regardless, there is a certain point where Michaela should have known that what she was doing was dangerous. To me, I think those are pretty much the main arguments here. I think if I had to assess the situation as a whole, I think that Michaela knew that Michael was into some unusual things, so things escalated throughout the night. I personally do believe that he probably consented to the bag being on his head at the very least, though, of course, we may never know. I'm just making that assumption based on his other requests, but I could be wrong. But again, I think that each time he requested something even more extreme, Michaela probably asked him for more money. And I think the more he wanted, the more money she got, and it just got out of control. Based on what we know in this very moment, I don't think Michaela intended to kill or even seriously hurt Michael. I'll say it outright. Do I think her actions were irresponsible and reckless? Yes. But do I think she intended to kill him? No. And I honestly don't think, again, at this point, I don't think the prosecution will be able to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt unless there's video evidence that shows that she intended for him to be dead. At most, I think Michaela should be charged with reckless, or in California, it's considered involuntary manslaughter. I think this charge makes the most sense for what we know about the situation. It can be argued that Michael was not in a state of mind to make rational decisions while Michaela was. She's the one that boasted her 10 years of experience and is, pretty familiar with fetishes and things like that. So knowing that, she knew that she was engaging in dangerous behaviors by tying him up and putting the bag over his head. I don't think that she intended for him to die, but I think her careless actions did lead to his death. If I had to charge her with something, that is what I would do. But even with that, I know that we don't have all the information that the prosecution has. Maybe they have evidence of intent. We don't yet know. But regardless, this case, to me at least, is basically the definition of a gray area. With that being said, though, now that you've all heard my thoughts, I want to hear from you all. I think this is one of those cases that will have a lot of differing opinions, which will lead to a great discussion. So please let me know what you think down below. Was this a murder? Was it manslaughter? Or do you think she shouldn't be criminally charged at all? Let's discuss this and any other thoughts you have in the comments below. If you liked this video, please make sure to go ahead and leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to turn the notification bell on so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Spotify. All will be linked down below. And if you have any case suggestions, please make sure to fill out the Google form, which is also listed down below. With that, I hope you guys have an amazing week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.